Welcome to the last video store. I'm your host, Bud Haddonfield. And this past weekend was a very lazy weekend for me. I got a chance to not do much for once in my life. And I figured I'd revisit all six of George A. Romero Living Dead films. And it consists of Night of the Living Dead from the 60s, Dawn of the Dead from the 70s, Day of the Dead took place in the 80s. Didn't get anything throughout the 90s, but in 2005 we got the fourth chapter, which was Land of the Dead. A couple years later, Diary of the Dead, and a few years after that, the last official entry with Survival of the Dead. They were all six good films. I enjoyed all six of them, some better than others, yes. But George A. Romero was just an awesome pioneer in filmmaking. Dating back to the 60s, he had a lot of just real life situations that he was able to put into zombie movies, and that he was able to really adapt the zombie subgenre and pretty much made it what it was. They had a lot of clones over the years, some movies that are unofficial sequels or unofficial attachments, but let's talk all about it. So like I said, in 1968, we got Night of the Living Dead. It was just a very fun, gritty, black and white horror movie. They had color back then with the movies, but of course George A. Romero wanted to go black and white for various reasons, and I think it was really good. Even to this day, if there's a colorized version of it, I'll purposely skip it just to watch the black and white version. And it's just about just shit happening in this world. The dead's rising, eating the living. There's no way to stop it, and certain people need to pretty much figure a way to survive within each other, and just it doesn't work for various reasons. And when we get into the movie, you're going to see the conflicts that these people have and how they're not always on the same page and different mindsets. But yeah, this one kind of ends in a bummer. And a year or two ago, I had showed this in its entirety on my YouTube show, which was a tribute to Monster Vision from the 90s. And I was able to do that because Night of the Living Dead had hit under, I'm trying to think what I want to say here. It pretty much it was copyright free, and they didn't make any money off of it. Everybody was able to release different versions of this movie. You could play it wherever. That's why you see it a lot in other movies as it's playing in the background, because they can literally show it and not pay anything for it. People made sequels to it. People made their own editions, and it really sucked that George A. Romero wasn't able to make as much money off it or anything, if anything. So, Night of the Living Dead, awesome, cool classic. Absolutely love this movie. At this point in time in the 60s, like, zombies was a thing, but it had something to do with voodoo and all kind of other stuff. So I'm not going to say that he just on himself created this own zombie thing, but he really evolved it and made it what it really was. So if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, stop what you're doing and check it. And yes, it's from the 60s, it's black and white, but just because it's old doesn't mean it can't be new to you. So 10 years later, George A. Romero, who had made movies in between Night and Dawn, came up with Dawn of the Dead. And yes, I just mentioned it. He did other things, Season of the Witch, The Crazies. But Dawn of the Dead was a huge, awesome, just everybody knew this movie. It was in the drive-in theaters. It was a big deal in the 70s, and he had started with this whole story within this movie that, yes, the dead are mindless zombies, but at some point they go back to doing what they're used to doing. So we get a group of people who, this is one of Ken Foray's first big movies. He plays one of the SWAT team guys, very recognizable. He's in a lot of movies, one of my favorite actors, and he just stands out within this movie right here. Him along with some other people, they go to this mall and they kind of board themselves inside of it, and they try to make everyday life work while trying to just live within this zombie apocalypse. And all the dead eventually goes back to the mall for shopping purposes. Like I said, it's just they revert back to what they know, and they get more into it on the next film. Dawn of the Dead's really fun. This was the first Living Dead movie that Tom Savini got to work on. He was in Vietnam for the first one, but he does the special effects for this one, and he plays a small part as one of the biker gangs later on in the film when they raid the mall. Um, just fun and badass. I've always loved this movie, even the first time I've seen it in the early 90s on a old shitty VHS copy, and the colors of the zombies was just cool because it was like just this blue. Uh, but yeah, just such an iconic cover. Dawn of the Dead. Definitely check this one out. Uh, we've had, I know I'm saying a lot. We've gotten many releases of it. Majority of the Blu-ray DVD releases are out of print. This was the one that Anchor Bay, I believe it was, but this out many years ago. I was able to snag a copy of it before it went out of print. And Second Sight Films, I think is the name of the company. Yeah, Second Sight. They had made this box set. The 4K is region free, but for some reason the Blu-ray is region locked. I don't know what the issue is overseas that we don't have the distribution rights to Dawn of the Dead, but it was a shame because a whole generation of people needs to be checking out this movie. But you can find it streaming on Amazon Prime if you pay $10 for it, and that's definitely a bargain to own a piece of George A. Romero's classic, Dawn of the Dead. So George A. Romero and his writing partner, John Russo, they split up on this time period. They were working on individual projects, and they had an issue within each other where they wanted to take their zombie movies into different directions. That's why the first movie was Night of the Living Dead. John Russo was able to keep the Living Dead portion and whatnot. So that's why when we got Dawn of the Dead, it was like that. And within 1985, George A. Romero did Day of the Dead, and John Russo did Return of the Living Dead. That was a great movie within itself. That's one of my favorite horror movies of all times. But Day of the Dead is definitely amazing. It ranks up there, if not better, in my opinion, than Dawn of the Dead, because it's just a fun thing. Because Dawn of the Dead was a good movie. It was a great movie. Like I said, everybody had watched it. And where do you go from here? There's nowhere to go but up. But no, George A. Romero went down. And he has some military people and some scientists and a pilot and whatnot, and they're living underground in the bunkers. Somehow the zombies are still catching up to them, and they have their own system, and it's like they're going cabin fever, just being held within together in close proximity. The military people and scientists are really hating each other, and they're not working together. And you got Joe Pilato's character, Captain Rose, who's turned into a huge fucking tyrant of his own thing, and he wants everything to go his way, but he's a sneaky piece of shit. Well, like I said earlier, in the Dawn of the Dead portion, Dr. Frankenstein, which is the character's nickname, is what he's called throughout the movie. He has this one zombie played by Gary Sherman, I believe his name is, and he's Bub. And he's just working, doing a bunch of tests on Bub, and Bub showing him how he's reverting back to his original self. So one part of the movie where Captain Rose comes into the room, he has the captain insignia on his uniform, and Bub, who had supposedly served into the military, recognizes it and salutes him. And he listens to music on a Walkman, and it just goes to show you George A. Romero was just making something more than just a brainless zombie movie. Like, his zombies had brains. But this one's definitely a good movie. It's still in print. You can find it on Blu-ray and DVD. Shout Factory did a very great transfer of this film. I love how they incorporate the original cover art along with new commissioned stuff for these. Definitely check this one out. Tom Savini returns as the makeup effects artist. Greg Nicotero's in here as a minor role as a military guy. He ends up getting killed. So I'm sorry, spoiler free. 35, almost 40-year-old movie. But yeah, definitely check out Day of the Dead. This one is amazing on its own. So from 1985 to 2005, huge 20-year gap. George A. Romero did a couple things. He did a movie. He did Monkey Shines. He did The Dark Half. He did a movie with Dario Argento in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a little anthology movie. It wasn't bad, but he got some work. And in 2005-ish, he wanted to return back to his original series, or his original project, and come up with Land of the Dead. I remember I got to go see this in theaters in 2005, and it was just a big deal to me because I'd loved all the previous three. And this picks up 20 plus years after Day of the Dead. People out and about, they have this one city that Dennis Hopper's in, and he's pretty much like the governor of the city. And it's the same as what I was saying. Like one of the zombies in it, he works at a gas station, and he's just fueling up this car all day long, and he's starting to feel for his fellow zombies who are getting killed by Dennis Hopper's guys. John Leguizamo's in here. He plays a really good part. That's not Sean Beam. Simon Baker, he's in here as well. Asia Argento is in here, so that's perfect that he casted her. And a lot of other different actors, he always uses the same. Tom Savini comes back as a continuation to his character in Dawn of the Dead. And I remember when they were making the movie, they did like a little segment of it where they made him look the same with the same mustache and clothes and whatnot. So that was cool. You also had Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright. They play small parts in this movie because Shaun of the Dead was such a big movie, and George A. Romero loved it, and vice versa. So he was able to do a combination of the two movies with the actor and director. So that was also fun. But Land of the Dead is just great. I didn't think it was as beloved by critics, but again, I haven't seen this movie since 2005 when it hit on theaters and DVD and whatnot. And like I said, I rewatched it this past weekend, and I still think it holds up, and it has a lot of messages that just got lost in translation over the years. Like if you have not seen Land of the Dead, or if you've seen it years ago and don't think it was really worth it, just give it another shot, and I almost guarantee that you're going to be surprised by it. This movie, I believe, just got a new release from Scream Factory. All the other DVD and Blu-rays are still in print, so this one's readily available all the time. From 2005 to 2007 was George A. Romero's shortest gap, and he comes up with Diary of the Dead, which is a found footage style zombie movie. And this was before Paranormal Activity, like Blair Witch, had hit, and they had some other found footage movies. Like this even came before, I think, Cloverfield, if I'm not mistaken. But this one was fun. Like when I first watched it, I didn't care for it. But when I rewatched it yesterday, I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. The timeline is different because this movie supposedly takes place as the same day as Night of the Living Dead, like as the first thing starts to happen with the Dead Awakening. But it's just a modern take on it. So, of course, it's not supposed to be like in the 60s. It's just the timeline doesn't necessarily matter with this. But this follows like some film students. And the guy behind the camera just wants to show the world exactly what's happening because supposedly the government's not telling them everything that's the truth and whatnot. And it's, again, George A. Romero takes things from real life and he puts in these zombie movies. And this one wasn't bad. It's very gritty, and you follow these characters, and of course their fates isn't as positive as other movies. But this one's a whole lot of fun. The DVD and Blu-ray still in print. You can find this one. It's streaming on Amazon Prime, I think, for free right now. But definitely give this one a shot. I'm trying to think if anybody returned from it. One of the little guys who was at the very beginning of Land of the Dead is in this movie. Sean Roberts. He was also in Here for Blood, which was a pretty cool movie with Dee Snider, but I'm rambling. Greg Nicotero took over the special effects in this one, so check this one out. All right, now, the very last movie from 2007-ish to, I believe, 2012 is, and I could be wrong about the year, but I'm thinking 2012, 2010, I think it shows on here, and it's Survival of the Dead. Cool lenticular cover. This was George A. Romero's last Dead movie from this series. This one was a whole lot of fun. This takes place the same time as Diary of the Dead, And one of the actors who was in Land of the Dead is also in this movie. I'm not sure if he's the same character, but George A. Romero always used the same actors playing different parts and whatnots. But like I said, it takes place at the same time as Diary of the Dead, which is a cool little timeline on its own. This one's a whole lot of fun as well. It's different, and it came later on in his career, and it's not as good as the previous ones. And I'm talking like the especially the first three. Sorry, but this one is definitely worth watching because this was one of George A. Romero's last movies that he actually worked on before he passed away. And it is kind of sad to see because this one definitely didn't get as much respect as the other ones, and I know the last three total didn't get as much care. And this follows this little Irish fella, and he's with some National Guard soldiers. And like I said, the little boy who played Roderick in the first three, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and they're trying to get to this island, and it kind of goes off the rail. But it's interesting and it's worth a watch if you haven't seen it. But this was another one that the first time I watched it when it came out, I didn't care for it too much. But when I rewatched it yesterday, I'm like, it's not as bad as I remember. This one, the DVD and Blu-ray is still in print, and I believe you can find this one streaming on Amazon Prime as well. All right, now let's talk about some of the later remakes slash unofficial sequels and unofficial attachments. It's this whole thing. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 1990 remake, Night of the Living Dead. I absolutely love this movie. I've seen this one before the original, and it was one of those that I thought was just a pure masterpiece. Tom Savini directs this movie, but George A. Romero has a lot of involvement. And they remade this movie, what, 22 years later from the original 1968 to 1990 because they wanted to try to make some money off of it. This has like an all-star cast. Bill Moseley's in it, Tom Toles. This was Tony Todd's first horror movie, like before he was in Candyman. I think he was in another little voodoo movie, but I'm rambling off. Patricia Tallman, who was in Night Riders, which was another George A. Romero movie from the early 80s. I'm splitting hairs again here. But this one's really cool, and it's pretty much like a modernized take of Night of the Living Dead this time. Like I said, 68 to 1990, so not much has changed. But he changes some of the characters in this movie and some of their fates, which is it's pretty much badass. I just remember seeing like the looks of the zombies was just so cool. But if I'm not mistaken, like the studio really fucked this movie, and they changed a lot of stuff that they wanted to do, which is a shame because, oh man, this was such a great movie. So this was the first remake of his work, and like I said, George A. Romero had a part in it. All right, we're going to talk about these two things because the 30th anniversary, which came out, like 30 years would have been 1998, and this was the DVD that they put out. They only released so many copies of this thing, and they had new added footage, which was just weird, modern at this time's take. And what they were doing is at the same time they were working on another movie called Children of the Living Dead, which was supposed to be a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And a lot of people talk shit about it. I actually really dug this movie because I like bad movies, and it's fun and it's cheesy. And we get Tom Savini and Martin Shiroff. I know I'm butchering that last name, but I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he's actually a pretty cool dude. His sister's Martina McBride, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, Abbott Hayes is this weird little fucking dude, and he looks like Matthew McGrory, who was Tiny from the House of 1,000 Corpses movie. And he takes these kids and brings them to this barn, and he has something to do with the fucking zombies, and it's this whole thing. But it's not bad. Both of these movies you can find streaming on Amazon Prime. They're both long out of print, so you gotta pay for it. But I'm sorry, Amazon Prime. They're on YouTube streaming, especially with the added edition. But I hate to say it's crap, but it's crap worth watching at least once. So check out the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead with the extended scenes and Children of the Living Dead. So we're going to back up to 1988, and William Hinsman, who was the first Graveyard Zombie, he's that iconic looking white-haired character who attacks our two leads, Judith O'Day and I can't think of the actor who played the part of the brother Johnny. But anyway, he's that very iconic looking zombie at the very beginning of Night of the Living Dead. And years later, he wanted to make his own version, to piggyback off of it. And he made a little movie called Flesh Eater, which the original Night of the Living Dead was titled Night of the Flesh Eaters. And yeah, it's even if you say right here, it says starring the original Night of the Living Dead zombie. I know supposedly George A. Romero was pissed that Bill Hinsman was making this movie. He had sent him like a cease and desist letter. Bill Hinsman told him no, and he was not invited to the 1990 remake a couple years later. But this is a fun movie too, and it takes place with this farmer just uncovering this grave out of nowhere. And when he opens up the grave, the zombie wakes up and bites him, and it's a cheaper version of Night of the Living Dead, and it takes place on Halloween. And I actually really dug this movie. I did a review on it about a year or two ago, and it's a fun one. Sorry about the glare, but it's 80s, it's cheesy, it's zombie messes. It's not the worst out there. I love it. Check it out. All right, all is quiet in the horror movie genre. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, comes out in 2003. And at this point of time, everything starts to get remade. And Zack Snyder in 2004 did Dawn of the Dead. This was a remake of it. So it's not like it's just like an in-name remake. Like it's actually a governed remake. Takes place in the mall, just in the first one. We have similar characters in it. Similar story, but the only thing is different that I don't like is we have a running fast zombies. And that always bugged me because the ones that with George A. Romero was just slow, it'll take a lot for them to take you, but not this one. These motherfuckers do parkour and they're like ninjas the whole time. And it's a beloved remake and it's not bad. It's just I had issues with it, but I know a good movie when I see it. So, Dawn of the Dead, it was fun. It kicked off some more remakes to George A. Romero, and I'm going to do it all in one take because there's a lot of them. And I don't own all of them. I own a few of them. One of the first ones I remember is Night of the Living Dead 3D with Sid Haig, and this one came out 2006. And I remember reading about it in a Fangoria magazine, and I was super excited for it. I went to fucking Walmart. I bought it. That's when they had to go behind the glass cases, so I had to wait for a motherfucker to come unlock it. I get it. I'm all excited. I open up. No fucking 3D glasses in it. So I had to get to my house. I got the biggest headache trying to watch this goddamn movie. It was a whole thing. But years later, I ended up getting some 3D glasses, and it was still shit. We got a white bin, which... Why do that? It's like we had Dwayne Jones portrayals him as a black man, which is great. Defined the role of it, did amazingly. We had Tony Todd take over in 1990. Loved him in it. Tony Todd's one of the best. And then we get this fucking... I'm not going to talk about race, but it was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? An insult. An insult. So we get Night of the Living Dead reanimation with Wishmaster and Herbert West, Andrew Divoff and Jeffrey Combs. This one was kind of bad. I don't remember liking this one at all. But this one did include the 3D glasses because it came out 3D as well. We got Day of the Dead 2, which I don't even know if this was like a sequel to the original Day of the Dead. This Day of the Dead, or the remake that came out a couple years afterwards or before this with Ving Rhames. That's this whole thing right there. We got Night of the Living Dead Nemesis, if I'm fucking that one up. Sid Haig was in this movie as well. I remember this one being pretty damn bad too, but it had Courtney Gaines in it, which he was always a cool little character actor. Like I said, we had Day of the Dead from the later 2000s, 2008, Ving Rhames and fucking Nick Cannon's in this movie. And Ving Rhames plays Captain Rhodes, so that's cool that they kept this name, but this one was pretty goddamn bad too. And then we got another remake, Day of the Dead Bloodlines, which this one wasn't that great either. And we had one that I actually thought was pretty cool, and it was Night of the Animated Dead. And the reason why I liked it is it's pretty much the exact same thing, but like a cartoon Scooby-Doo version. And the two guys from Psych, James Rode Rodriguez and Dule Hill, does the voices. So that was pretty cool. So that was just a brief topic discussion about George A. Romero's dead films. They've made many other movies trying to actually hold that thought for a second. We're gonna add some more movies while I'm sitting here, not doing nothing with my life, but just enjoying it. So after Dawn of the Dead, they had made a movie in the 70s. It was a Lucio Fulci movie, and it was released in the USA. Well, released in the US as Zombie 2, and overseas it was just Zombie. And this was like just a fun, cheesy Italian version. So when Zombie 3 came out, it was a sequel to Zombie, which was a Italian remake / Italian sequel to Dawn of the Dead. They're fun, cheesy messes. I love giallos. I love Italian horrors just in general. Lucio Fulci, which was another awesome Italian director. He made a bunch of fun movies, but it doesn't stop there. We also get Zombie 4 After Death and Zombie 5 Killing Birds, and it's a lot. So I'm gonna stop right there because there's many other movies that I can just go grab and talk about because it all has something to do with George A. Romero because he was the godfather of the zombies. So I'm just gonna stop. I'm Bud Haddonfield. Thank you for tuning into the last video store. Halloween's almost here. We're less than 2 weeks away. Super excited. I just hate how fast it goes, but you all have a nice day. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.